He moved slowly between the stainless steel sinks, his weathered hands steady as he scraped plates that others had left behind. The young cooks called him Turtle behind his back, laughing at how he methodically cleaned each dish like it mattered. What they didn't know was that those same hands had once held a rifle scope steady enough to make impossible shots from distances they couldn't even imagine. Welcome to Interesting Human Stories. Before we dive into this powerful tale of hidden pasts and quiet strength, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe that everyone has a story worth telling, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter more than you know. The back kitchen of Romano's Italian restaurant was a world unto itself. Steam rose from industrial dishwashers, the clatter of plates mixed with the sizzle of pans, and young cooks moved with the frantic energy of people trying to prove themselves. In the corner, away from the chaos, stood the dish pit, a stainless steel island where one man worked alone. Miguel Vasquez, 58 years old, had been washing dishes at Romano's for 3 years. He arrived every day at 2 p.m., tied on his apron with the same deliberate movements, and began his quiet routine. The other kitchen staff barely noticed him, except when they needed clean plates or had jokes to make. "Hey, Turtle," called out Danny, a 22-year-old line cook with sleeve tattoos and an attitude bigger than his experience. "Think you could move any slower back there? We're backed up on dinner plates." Miguel didn't respond. He simply continued his methodical process. Scrape, rinse, wash, sanitize, stack. Each movement was precise, economical, purposeful. The young cooks mistook his carefulness for slowness, his quietness for simplicity. Tony Marcelli, the head chef and owner's son, was the worst of them. At 26, he'd never worked anywhere but his father's restaurant, but he carried himself like he'd conquered the culinary world. "Miguel," he'd say with exaggerated patience, "in this business, speed matters. Maybe you should consider retirement." Miguel would nod politely and continue working. He never argued, never defended himself, never mentioned that he'd learned patience in places where a single rushed movement could mean the difference between life and death. The truth was, Miguel had been many things before he became a dishwasher: husband, father, soldier, sniper. But those chapters of his life felt like they belonged to someone else now, someone who existed before the roadside bomb in Kandahar took his squad, before the survivor's guilt drove him to drink, before his wife left and took their daughter with her. Now he was just the quiet man in the corner, washing other people's dishes and trying to find peace in the simple rhythm of his work. Every day was the same, and Miguel found comfort in that predictability. The lunch rush would start around 11:30, when the servers would bring back trays loaded with half-eaten salads and pasta bowls. He'd scrape each plate clean, checking for any food that shouldn't go down the drain, then feed everything through the industrial washer. The young cooks would rush past his station, grabbing clean plates without acknowledgement. Sometimes they'd bump into him in their haste, muttering quick apologies without slowing down. Miguel had learned to position himself strategically, always aware of the traffic flow, always one step ahead of potential collisions. It was a skill that served him well in his previous life. Jessica, a 19-year-old prep cook fresh out of culinary school, was one of the few who treated Miguel with basic courtesy. "Thank you, Miguel," she'd say when picking up clean knives or cutting boards. Her politeness always reminded him of his daughter, Maria, who would be about Jessica's age now if she still thought about him at all. The dinner rush was different. Higher stakes, more pressure, shorter tempers. Tony would prowl the kitchen like a caged animal, barking orders and criticism in equal measure. "Miguel, where are my sauté pans? Come on, old man, we're dying out here." During those moments, Miguel would increase his pace slightly, but never to the point of compromising quality. He'd learned long ago that rushing led to mistakes, and mistakes in his former profession had consequences no one could afford. Sometimes, during quiet moments between rushes, Miguel would find himself staring out the small window above his station. It faced the alley behind the restaurant, where delivery trucks came and went, where employees took smoke breaks, where the real world continued its chaotic dance. He'd watch the patterns of movement, unconsciously cataloging sightlines and cover positions, habits from another life that refused to fade. 3 months into his employment at Romano's, the kitchen culture had settled into a routine of casual disrespect toward Miguel. The younger staff had grown bolder in their mockery, treating him like a piece of equipment rather than a person. "I swear my grandmother moves faster than Turtle," laughed Marcus, another line cook, "and she's been dead for 5 years. Even Jessica had started to distance herself, caught up in the need to fit in with her peers. The casual cruelty of youth, Miguel thought, remembering his own arrogance at that age, before the world had taught him about consequences. It was a Wednesday evening in late October when everything changed. The restaurant was busy but not slammed, the kind of steady pace that should have been manageable for everyone. Miguel was in his usual rhythm when he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Through his small window, he saw a black sedan pull into the alley. It parked in a spot that blocked the emergency exit, and 3 men got out. They moved wrong, too purposeful, too coordinated. One stayed by the car, scanning the area. The other 2 headed for the back door of the restaurant. Miguel's training kicked in immediately. 20 years in the military, 12 of those as a sniper, had taught him to read situations that others missed. This wasn't a food delivery or a casual visit. This was something else entirely. He quietly set down the plate he was washing and moved to get a better view. The men were young, probably early 20s, wearing dark clothing and moving with the nervous energy of people about to do something they'd never done before. Amateurs. But armed amateurs were often the most dangerous kind. The back door opened, and Miguel heard Danny's voice. "Hey, kitchen's closed to visitors, guys. We're not here for food," came the reply, and Miguel heard the unmistakable sound of metal on metal, a gun being cocked. Time slowed down, the way it always did when training took over from thought. Miguel assessed the situation with the cold calculation of a professional soldier. 3 men, at least one armed, probably all armed. Kitchen full of civilians with no combat experience. Multiple exit points compromised. Close quarters, poor visibility, lots of potential cover, but also lots of innocent people. "Everyone in the kitchen, now," one of the intruders shouted. "This is a robbery. Nobody moves, nobody gets hurt." The kitchen staff froze. Tony stood by the grill, spatula still in hand, his face gone white. Danny had his hands half raised, confusion and fear warring on his young face. Jessica had dropped behind the prep station. Smart girl. Marcus was trying to edge toward the walk-in cooler. "I said nobody moves." The gunman's voice was higher now, stress making him unpredictable. Miguel could see him from his position by the dish pit. Young, nervous, weapon held incorrectly. Dangerous precisely because he was scared. "Look," Tony said, trying to sound calm and failing, "there's no cash back here. The register's out front with the manager." "We know where the cash is," the second man said. "But first we're going to make sure nobody calls the cops. Everyone on the ground, hands where we can see them." Miguel remained perfectly still, partially concealed behind his station. The gunmen hadn't noticed him yet. Focused as they were on the more obvious targets, he had perhaps 30 seconds before they did a complete sweep of the kitchen. In those 30 seconds, he had to make a choice. For 3 years, he'd been Miguel the dishwasher, the quiet man who wanted nothing more than to be invisible. But watching these scared young men wave guns at people who'd never hurt anyone, seeing the terror in Jessica's eyes as she crouched behind the prep station, something older and deeper took control. He was Sergeant Miguel Vasquez again, 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, Scout Sniper qualified, 47 confirmed kills, veteran of 3 deployments. And these amateur thugs had just threatened his people. Miguel moved with a speed and precision that would have shocked anyone who'd only known him as the slow dishwasher. His first priority was the gunman closest to the civilians, the one threatening Tony and Danny. The industrial kitchen provided multiple improvised weapons. Miguel's hand closed around a heavy cast-iron pan, and in one fluid motion he stepped out from behind his station and hurled it with deadly accuracy. The pan caught the first gunman in the temple, dropping him instantly. The second gunman spun toward the sound, but Miguel was already moving. He'd grabbed a long carving knife from Jessica's prep station and closed the distance before the man could bring his weapon to bear. A quick strike to the wrist disabled the gun hand. A follow-up to the solar plexus doubled him over, and a controlled blow to the back of the neck put him down. The third man, the lookout, heard the commotion and came running through the back door. He found Miguel waiting for him, standing calmly in the center of the kitchen with a gun in each hand, the weapons he'd taken from his unconscious partners. "I'd recommend you stop right there," Miguel said quietly. His voice carried authority that made the young man freeze mid-step. "Put your hands up and get on the ground." The whole incident had taken less than 45 seconds. The police arrived 12 minutes later, summoned by a patron who'd heard the commotion. They found 3 would-be robbers zip-tied with kitchen towels, Miguel's improvised restraints, 2 unconscious and 1 very cooperative. The kitchen staff stood in stunned silence, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. "Sir," said the lead officer approaching Miguel, "can you tell me what happened here?" Miguel set the 2 pistols carefully on the prep counter, making sure they were pointed away from everyone. 3 individuals attempted to rob the restaurant, he said simply. "I intervened.
Officer Patricia Santos looked around the kitchen, taking in the scene. She was a 15-year veteran of the force, and she recognized professional work when she saw it. "Sir, what's your background?" "Army," Miguel replied. "Retired." The detective who arrived 20 minutes later was more specific in his questions. Detective Ray Collins had seen enough to know that taking down 3 armed men single-handedly wasn't something most people could do. "Sergeant Vasquez," he said, reading from a quickly pulled background check. "75th Rangers, sniper qualified, 3 Purple Hearts, Bronze Star with V device. You've been washing dishes?" Miguel nodded. "It's honest work." Detective Collins looked around the kitchen again, where the young cooks were still processing what had happened. Hell of a career change. In the days following the incident, Romano's restaurant became the center of local media attention. The story of the dishwasher who stopped an armed robbery spread quickly, but Miguel declined all interview requests and asked that his full military record remain private. The kitchen staff, however, couldn't stop talking about what they'd witnessed. Danny, whose life Miguel had likely saved, was particularly shaken. "I don't understand," he said to Jessica during their shift the next day. "He moved like someone in a movie. Where did that come from?" Tony had done his own research, using his father's connections to learn more about their quiet dishwasher. What he found left him speechless. Miguel Vasquez wasn't just a veteran, he was a decorated war hero with a service record that read like an action novel. He was a sniper, Tony told the assembled kitchen staff during a break. Not just any sniper, one of the best. His unit was responsible for eliminating high-value targets in Afghanistan. He saved dozens of American lives. Jessica asked the question everyone was thinking. Then why is he washing our dishes? The answer came from Miguel himself, who'd been listening from his station. He set down the plate he was cleaning and turned to face them, his expression serious but not unkind. "Because," he said quietly, "sometimes the most important battle is the one you fight against yourself." Over the following weeks, as the restaurant returned to its normal routine, Miguel began to open up to his coworkers. Not all at once and never more than necessary, but enough for them to understand the man they'd worked beside for months without really seeing. He told them about Kandahar province, about the forward operating base where his team was stationed, about the morning patrol that hit an IED, killing 4 of his closest friends while he watched through a scope from 800 meters away, powerless to help. He told them about the survivor's guilt that followed him home, about the nightmares that made sleep impossible, about the drinking that cost him his marriage and his relationship with his daughter. "I couldn't find peace in the noise," he explained to Jessica one quiet evening. "Everything was too loud, too fast, too angry. I needed to find somewhere quiet, somewhere simple. Washing dishes gives me that." Tony, who'd spent months mocking Miguel's pace, finally understood. "The speed thing. In my line of work," Miguel said, "patience was everything. One rushed shot, one moment of impatience, and good people died. I learned to take my time, to do things right the first time." Marcus asked about the precision with which Miguel had handled the robbers. "That was incredible, man. Where did you learn to move like that?" 15 years of close-quarters combat training," Miguel replied, "but I hoped I'd never have to use it again." The atmosphere in Romano's kitchen changed completely after that night. The casual mockery disappeared, replaced by genuine respect for Miguel's skills and his story. The young cooks began asking him questions, not about combat, which he rarely discussed, but about discipline, focus, and the kind of mental toughness that allowed someone to excel under pressure. Danny became something of a protege, asking Miguel to teach him about situational awareness and staying calm in stressful situations. "Not that I ever want to be in a fight," Danny explained, "but I want to be ready if I have to protect someone." Jessica started bringing her culinary textbooks to work, asking Miguel's opinion on knife techniques and precision cutting. She discovered that his military training had given him an appreciation for precision that translated well to food preparation. Even Tony swallowed his pride and apologized for the months of disrespect. "I thought you were just some old guy who didn't care about the job," he admitted. "I didn't realize you were being careful instead of slow." Miguel accepted the apology gracefully, but made it clear that he preferred to maintain his quiet routine. "I'm not here to be a hero," he said. "I'm here to do my job and find some peace." 6 months after the incident, Romano's had settled into a new rhythm. Miguel was still the dishwasher, still methodical and precise, but now his co-workers understood the difference between slow and careful. The local newspaper had written a feature story about the hero dishwasher, though they respected Miguel's request for privacy about his military service. The restaurant saw an increase in customers who wanted to eat where that amazing thing happened. Miguel found the attention uncomfortable but tolerable. What mattered more was that he'd found something he thought was lost forever, a sense of purpose beyond his own survival. The young cooks continued to learn from him, not just about kitchen work but about life. He taught Danny about responsibility, showing him that real strength came from protecting others, not proving yourself. He helped Jessica understand that precision and patience were virtues in any profession. One evening as the dinner rush was winding down, Tony approached Miguel's station with an envelope. "What's this?" Miguel asked, wiping his hands on his apron. "Raise," Tony said simply. "And a new title, kitchen supervisor. My dad and I talked it over. We want you to help train the new people, not just in dishwashing but in, I don't know how to put it, in being professionals," Miguel finished. "I understand," Tony nodded. "Exactly. Will you do it?" Miguel looked around the kitchen, at the young people who'd become more than just co-workers. He thought about his daughter Maria, somewhere out there living her life without him. He couldn't undo the mistakes that had cost him his family, but maybe he could help these kids avoid making their own. "Yes," he said, "I'll do it." 1 year after the robbery attempt, Romano's kitchen had become known throughout the city for its professionalism and the quality of its staff. Young cooks who trained there were sought after by other restaurants, carrying with them the lessons they'd learned from Miguel about precision, patience, and quiet competence. Miguel had moved from the dish pit to a small office near the kitchen, where he conducted orientation for new employees and helped resolve conflicts before they became problems. He still washed dishes when the restaurant was busy. Old habits died hard, but his primary role had evolved into something more meaningful. The transformation wasn't just professional. Miguel had started attending therapy sessions through the VA, working to address the trauma that had driven him to the bottom of the bottle years earlier. He'd even reached out to his ex-wife, not to ask for reconciliation, but to apologize and to let Maria know that her father was still alive and thinking about her. The response had been cautious but not hostile. Maria, now 23 and finishing college, had agreed to meet for coffee. It was a small step, but it was progress. Detective Collins stopped by Romano's occasionally, always making sure to say hello to Miguel. During one visit, he brought news that the 3 would-be robbers had all pled guilty and received prison sentences. "The one who was conscious that night," Collins said, "he asked me to give you a message, said to tell you that watching you handle that situation made him realize he was on the wrong path. He's been clean since he got locked up, working on his GED." Miguel nodded thoughtfully. "Good for him." "You know," Collins continued, "we could use someone with your skills in the department, training recruits, maybe consulting on tactical situations." Miguel smiled, but shook his head. "I appreciate the offer, Detective, but I've found my place. These kids here, they're my mission now." And it was true. The young cooks and servers who passed through Romano's carried with them lessons that went far beyond food service. They learned about responsibility, about the difference between looking tough and being strong, about the quiet dignity that came from doing your job well regardless of whether anyone noticed. Danny had been promoted to sous chef and was applying to culinary school. Jessica had opened her own catering business and still called Miguel for advice. Even Marcus, who'd been the loudest in his mockery, had developed into a reliable team leader who treated everyone with respect. Miguel Vasquez still arrives at Romano's every day at 2 p.m. He still ties on his apron with the same deliberate movements, still moves with the precision that once made him one of the military's most effective snipers. But now he's surrounded by people who understand that his careful movements aren't slowness, they're mastery. The local veterans organization asked him to speak at their annual dinner, but he declined politely. Miguel had never been comfortable with praise or recognition. His satisfaction came from smaller moments. Seeing a young cook handle a stressful situation with calm professionalism, watching someone choose precision over speed, knowing that the lessons he'd learned in the hardest possible way were helping others build better lives. Sometimes, late in the evening after the restaurant had closed, Miguel would stand at his old station by the dish pit and look out the small window at the alley. He'd remember the night when 3 scared young men had made a terrible choice, and how stopping them had somehow stopped his own long slide into despair. He'd found something in that kitchen that he'd been looking for without knowing it, a chance to serve again, to protect again, to make a difference in ways that didn't require a rifle or a scope. The dishes he washed, the people he trained, the quiet example he set, these were his weapons now, tools for building instead of destroying. Miguel Vasquez had been many things: soldier, sniper, husband, father, broken man, dishwasher. Now he was something new, a quiet guardian watching over a small corner of the world, making sure that the young people under his care learned not just how to cook, but how to live with honor. In the end, that was enough, more than enough. So now I ask you, have you ever met someone like Miguel? Someone whose quiet strength ran deeper than their simple job suggested? Someone who chose service over recognition, patience over speed, building up over breaking down? Share their story in the comments. Tell us about the quiet heroes in your own life. Because here at Interesting Human Stories, we believe that the most powerful people are often the ones who never feel the need to prove their power. They just show up, do their work, and make the world a little better. One dish, one lesson, one life at a time. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it. Help us honor the quiet heroes who choose to serve long after their official service has ended. We'll see you in the next story, and until then, remember, the person working quietly beside you might be carrying more strength, more history, and more wisdom than you could ever imagine.